You've probably heard people say things like, time heals, everything is temporary. Don't get too happy or too sad, it won't last. All this sounds philosophical, right? Almost like useless life advice. But what if there's actually a psychological reason behind this? Psychology explains this through something called hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation is the idea that human beings tend to return to a relatively stable emotional baseline after both positive and negative events. Let's start with positive events. For example, a new job. At first, it feels intense, elevated, and life changing, but slowly it becomes normal. That's the con of hedonic adaptation when it comes to positive experiences. Achievement can start to feel not enough. What once felt extraordinary becomes just ordinary, and sometimes that can make you question the significance of your own progress. But there's also a pro. Once your brain adapts to success, it creates space for new goals, pushes growth, and allows forward movement. If happiness stayed at peak intensity forever, we wouldn't be motivated to build anything further. That's why adaptation is what keeps us evolving. Now let's look at negative events. For example, a heartbreak. At first, it feels overwhelming, like the emotional state is going to be permanent. But over time, the intensity reduces, and that is the pro of hedonic adaptation for negative experiences. Pain becomes temporary, and you soon return to stability. But there is also a con here. When we adapt to discomfort, we can begin to normalize it sometimes. A stressful job becomes just how work is. Emotional neglect becomes this is how relationships are. Constant anxiety becomes this is just my personality. Because when something painful becomes familiar, it stops being urgent even if it is serious. So, what I like to say is that hedonic adaptation is neither entirely good nor entirely bad. It just protects us from living at emotional extremes, but it can also make us underestimate both our achievements and our struggles. And honestly, what fascinates me more is that this is an example of how our brain processes positive and negative experiences in similar ways. It also shows us that everything is short lived not because it doesn't matter or is meaningless, but because we are wired for emotional regulation. And maybe that's what people really mean when they say, this too shall pass. What do you think?